Welcome to our next broadcast live session for today. This one will be our party culture panel hosted by Jenna Parisi, Director of the Office of Health Promotion. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are recording this session, so if you do have to hop off, we will be posting the recording on our orientation website. In addition, closed captioning is available for today's presentation. You can toggle that on and off by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And then following the presentation, we will be doing a Q&A with our panelists. So go ahead and type any questions that you have in the chat. With that, I am going to turn things over to Jenna Parisi.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Almost afternoon, maybe afternoon, depending on where you are right now. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to share my screen. So if you will just allow me a minute for technology, we will jump right into here. All right, how do we look, Anna?
We look good.
Okay. So thanks again for joining us. This is the party panel. We're glad you're here. My name is Jenna Parisi. I'm the Director of the Office of Health Promotion. And I'll tell you a little bit about our department in a second, but you might also like to know that I am a ZAG alum. So my family sat through maybe a similar presentation when I came into Gonzaga as an undergrad, and it's been my pleasure to be back. This is my 6th year now. So excited to talk with you all about this topic and also to introduce a group of friends that I've brought along today, several panelists who are really experts in their areas, and I'm excited for you to have the opportunity to meet them and really spend some time today asking us questions. So how this presentation is going to look is that I'm going to, provide kind of an introduction, provide some context for this topic, and then I will have our panelists all introduce themselves, let you know how they intersect with students around the topic of alcohol and other drugs. We will kind of kick us off with some frequently asked questions, and then we'll turn it over to you all. So like Anna said, please be, submitting your questions in the chat box as you're thinking of them, and we will do our best to answer those with the time that we have today. I'm going to go ahead and not stop my video while I'm presenting so I don't distract myself. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm from the Office of Health Promotion. And we are really about fostering a culture of well-being across campus. And we know that we can't do that alone. But we do have 3 major topic areas. And those are the 3 that you see listed on the screen, if you're able to see right now. If not, those are alcohol and other drugs, healthy relationships and violence prevention, and mental and emotional well-being and suicide prevention. And what we know about these areas is that they are very intersectional. So while we're really going to focus on partying and alcohol and drugs today, we know that that really connects with these other topics. I also want you to hear from me why you're going to hear us talking most about alcohol, number 1, because that's the drug that we see the most on our campus. Second would be cannabis, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then other drugs are really going to kind of be further on down the line. So we may touch a little bit on smoking or vaping, but you won't hear us talk a ton about other party drugs. So what do we know about college student drinking? Well, we know that this is a time where it can happen, right? There's sort of an acceptance on the part of many students that there's an inherent, of this inherent risk, and that it's not really a big deal. There's also a lot of myths that students may hold around who is drinking. They think that, everybody does it and everybody's doing it more than them, when in reality, that may not be the case. Now, when we ask our students to tell us, if they made the choice to drink in the past month or in the past week or in the past year, what sort of happened for them? And in surveys, we say, did you experience any negative consequences? And these are the kinds of things that they talk about. So that could be blacking out. Maybe they forgot something that happened. Maybe they got in a fight. Something unwanted happened. And right now, I think something that we're going to talk about, what's being added to the list, is COVID-19. I did put in a specific citation from some data we collected this spring, which says that for a portion of students, they said that they haven't done their best on schoolwork due to drinking. And what I want you to notice from this is that that differs depending on what kind of student they are, right? So if they're an A student, they're less likely to do that. If they're a C student, they're even more likely to say that. So that may be a good talking point for you all. Now, going back to that myth idea, we know students, families are one place that student gets messages about partying in college, and they also get messages from a lot of other places. Stories they hear, social media, these all contribute to the challenge that our students have with accurately estimating the extent to which alcohol and other drug use actually occurs among their peers. And so that's no different on our campus in that students think that it's happening at much higher rates than it actually is. So you can see the perception, the difference between what percentage of students they think engage in things like binge drinking, which would be, drinking a number of drinks, 5 or more within a short amount of time, and also for cannabis use. Now, students at Gonzaga recognize that alcohol is part of the culture here, but at the same time, many wish that it wasn't emphasized as much. Now, being that we're getting to talk with all of you today, I want to acknowledge that some things have changed. I hope I'm not dating myself with this slide now, but obviously these conversations have really evolved. There's a lot more things that are on the table that we're thinking about in what some of you may perceive as, a simpler time, even if you had gone to college. And drinking is one of those things that also had changed. So while not as many students drink in dangerous ways as they think, some still do. And this is because hard alcohol has really become the norm. And so when that's too accessible and easy for students to get, and they consume it in large quantities, those are the types of things that have our Zags going to the hospital, right? It's not because they had been sipping on beer, it's because of liquor. And that's really why that we as staff on campus use a harm reduction approach. When we use a just say no approach with students, that's not really realistic based on their environment and the marketing that they see. But this is where you having knowledge of campus resources will be really helpful. So what are the other people and places that they can get this education on our campus, whether they're here in person or they're engaging remotely? Now, something else that I want to acknowledge, and several of these panelists have been part of an alcohol working group on campus. So 2 academic years ago, we went through an exercise of talking to a lot of members of our community about our culture around alcohol. And this generated a number of themes that were unique to Gonzaga. And I want to highlight a few of those because I think, again, this may be helpful in thinking about, for you all, talking points with your students. We heard from a lot of people that alcohol can be part of building community. It can be a way to bring people together. And what we know is that during the pandemic, we really need to be finding other ways to do this right now. When it comes to normalizing, the idea around that theme is that a lot of people sort of accept or expect that alcohol is just going to be a part of college life. The choice theme I want to highlight is about students having options, right? So always wanting them to know that you have the opportunity to say yes or no. When we talk about coping, what we really are talking about with our students here is what are effective ways to manage stress and change and challenges that are inevitable in college. And when students are turning to alcohol to do that, that may not be the most effective strategy for them. And then from an educational perspective, you see that that was highlighted a lot. Folks want to know how to educate students to have a responsible relationship with alcohol. And so we hope that we'll also have you as partners in that work. When it comes to cannabis use specifically, I'm kind of jumping to number 2 here, you'll see that the potency or the strength of THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, has really gone up over time. So again, thinking back to things that may have changed historically, and particularly we see this in our state. So Washington has even higher levels. So if we think about our students, maybe who might be thinking of college as a time to experiment with cannabis, we try to use harm reduction again because they may not be aware of the strength of the drug that they are trying. You'll notice that I have also striked out smoking because that's no longer the only means where our students can, it's not just smoking marijuana, it may be, vaping, it may be edibles, it may be topicals. So we've really had to broaden how we engage around this topic with students. We know that there's a lot of things that cannabis use can do, particularly when it comes to academic impacts. And so I've listed some of those. What we know is that when students decrease their use, these things can rebound. So for students who may be worried about, getting behind in class and not doing as well as they could, when they lessen their cannabis use, they can bounce back. But we know that for folks that are using it really quite frequently, that's going to have some significant impacts. We've also noticed on our campus, I mentioned, that we may have hospitalizations due to alcohol, but we often have hospitalizations related to mental health. And a number of areas, those have also been linked because our students had polysubstance use going on. So I want to highlight that for you all, and we'd be happy to answer additional questions about that. Now, research tells us a lot of things. So nobody's ever found a benefit to early initiation. That means that for students who start using alcohol or other drugs earlier, that doesn't help them later on, okay? It just increases the chance that they may actually develop some sort of problem with those things. Now, if a student has already started using in high school, they're going to be more likely to continue using in college. And using with their peers is a different context. So for some who may think, well, drinking with our family is a way to introduce students to this, drinking with friends doesn't really translate. So the environments that they're in where drinking may come up as an option in college look very different. And those students who say that they get messages of disapproval, so they know that their parents or families don't think that they should be drinking, are the students that we see having the lowest level of use. So you have a significant impact with the messages that you are sending to our students. SAGS Help SAGS is our bystander intervention program on campus. And I want to highlight this because a lot of students choose not to party on campus. In fact, I just ran some data yesterday and almost 1/2 of the incoming first-year class told us that they never drink. And 80% say that they never use drugs for non-medical personal use. But whether your student chooses to engage in the party culture or not, it's likely that at some point in their college career, they will encounter it. So we want them to have some skills and tools to respond in those situations. And that's where our SAGS Help SAGS care strategies are going to come in. If you think back to some of those themes that I brought to your attention from the alcohol listening group, one of them was also around service. So it's a big deal for our students to know how I can help someone else. And again, we're grateful to have you as partners in discussing this with your students. So parents tend to think that, if they might be the only ones having this conversation with their students. Or they think that, other families are more accepting and they don't think this is a big deal. So Anna, I'm going to ask you to initiate the poll that we've created, because what I want to know from you all is what percentage of new ZAG families do you think have talked with their students about alcohol and other drugs? I'm going to go ahead and take a look at these responses as they're coming in. Okay, looks like about half of you have voted so far, so keep those responses coming. We're thinking about what percentage of new families have had a talk with their students about alcohol and other drugs. Looks like we're hovering about half of you are thinking, about 3/4 of folks, 75%, some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. So highest 75%. Sharing the results. Hopefully everybody can see that. So not too far off, but not quite high enough. So we'll go ahead and close this poll. I'm going to jump to our next slide to give you the responses from our incoming students. So if you take a look at the slide here, what you're going to notice in response to the question on the ZAG into Action course, which is the mandatory online course for all incoming new students, have you ever had a conversation with your parents or family about alcohol and drugs? You can see that the minority, so only 5% of students said no. 95% said yes, and that's broken up into a few different categories. So the smallest portion said, yeah, we've talked about this one time. A really large group, over half, says yes, we've talked about this more than once, a few times. And then another substantial group, about a third, says, yes, we talk about this frequently. So again, knowing that families are not alone in having these important conversations. If you haven't come across the Parent and Family Essentials guidebook yet, this is a phenomenal resource, both broadly to talk about well-being and resources that are available on and off campus with your student. But in the back portion, there's some specific communication tips about talking with students about alcohol and other drugs. And those includes things like, we want you to talk early and talk often. Ask students open-ended questions, bring up hypothetical situations, learn about the resources that are on campus, and absolutely follow up if you see or hear about warning signs. So this Parent and Family Essentials Guide is available online as a resource. You can check out the Parent and Family Relations website, and I'll see if I can ask Anna to actually put a link into the chat box for anyone who may be interested in checking that out. So as I start to wrap up our presentation portion, I just want to emphasize that you all matter so much, are more influential, as I've mentioned, that you often realize in terms of having these conversations with your students. So whether you're feeling like this and very sad that your student may be leaving the nest, or maybe you're feeling like this because you're sending a last student off to college. And even though things may look different right now, you are more important than ever because of COVID-19. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and ask my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. So Brian, we're going in alphabetical order here. Can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself to our audience here, please?
Thanks, Jen. I was waiting for that. I needed your help.
Gotcha.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Stevenson. I'm the John L. Aram Chair of Business Ethics in the School of Business Administration here at Gonzaga. I am starting my 29th year here. So I may be the oldest timer of the panelist group. I don't know, but I've been here quite some time. Over the years, I've had the great honor and privilege of working with folks from the student development side of the house or student development side of Gonzaga, especially during my tenure as faculty president. And they have been extremely helpful in educating faculty about how they too can participate in well-being and health efforts centered around student drinking or drug use. And two things in particular that apply to where we as faculty members intersect with our students in ways that go beyond just the academic setting or the classroom setting. First, one of the things we try to do as faculty members is be very attentive to and engage with our students beyond the narrow academic framework that we have with them. We pay very close attention to changes in student behavior in courses and classrooms, student attendance, performance on exams and other projects, their behavior in class, for example, whether they're napping or not, or if they're very, very tired. And to the extent that is appropriate, without crossing boundaries we ought not to cross, we try to follow up with our students and find out, you know, what's going on with them. Is there anything we can do to help? Is alcohol, drug use, or drug use becoming an issue for them? Because sometimes I understand that students may be hesitant to say those things to residence life directors or other folks on the student development side, because sometimes they're a little nervous or fearful that they're going to be punished. But my experience in almost 30 years here has been with faculty members, they're less fearful that they're going to get punished for admitting or saying that alcohol use or drug use has become a problem for them in terms of their academic work. So we try to engage with them and accompany them along the way, assist them in getting the help that they need, either from us or from other divisions and other departments at the university. So on the academic side, we faculty members have always tried to partner with the student development side that relate to issues of student well-being and academic performance. And secondly, and this is something a little bit new to the GU culture, during the 90s and early 2000s, I wouldn't say this was happening much. We faculty have become very aware that we can model behavior for our students that we should not be modeling for them. Saying things in class that might tend to normalize a university culture or student body culture of drinking and alcohol use. For example, you have a student, so you have a fairly early class, 8 or 9 o'clock class, and the student looks very tired. You know, in the past, the faculty member may have made a crack about, hey, did you stay up too late last night? One too many beers, ha, 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 and tend to normalize that kind of behavior. So we've become very self-reflective about how we respond and interact with our students on that front, because we only want what is best for them. And so we try to assist everyone who at GU who is involved in promoting the cure personalis and the well-being of our students. So anyways, I just wanted to give you an idea from the academic side, the faculty side, how we try to intersect and interact with our students to stem the bad effects, the detrimental effects of what can be perceived as a party culture here at Gonzaga. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to ask Joey to go next.
Thank you, Jenna. My name is Dr. Joey Samud, and I'm the Associate Director in Student Involvement and Leadership here at GU. Student Involvement and Leadership exists with a lot of different co-curricular experiences outside the classroom. The ones that I oversee, and particularly we intersect with the work that the Office of Health Promotion does, and especially with AOD use. Student government, Gonzaga Student Body Association, is involved in our office and sits in our office. So we have a lot of students there who have specific positions in which they do work around health and safety. And there are also then interested students who might do educational programming or want to partner with the Office of Health Promotion to bring maybe more of a student approach to some of the education. We also offer Spike Nights as our late night weekend programming series that happens every Friday and Saturday of an academic year that we offer really as a way, starting at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and going until sometimes 12 or 1 in the morning, as a way for students to gather safely on campus and do something kind of fun, interesting, but that doesn't center around alcohol use. And then we also have all clubs and organizations. We have over 140 clubs and organizations on campus that are all in our office. And we partner a lot with Office of Health Promotion to help empower those club leaders to have talks around alcohol use with their clubs. Specifically, we do work with club sports and club sport leaders with student leaders out of Jenna's office to make sure that they're able to have conversations about what alcohol use looks like. And use them to, I think, really help to get whatever messaging out it is the students want. So.
Thank you, Joey. Okay, I'm going to ask Luke to speak next. Let me just find you in my queue.
Thanks, Jenna. Hi, everybody. My name is Luke Lovin. I'm the director of our mission and ministry team. And in our office, we combine ways to do active campus ministry, usually through things like retreats, small group ministries, our liturgies, daily and every Sunday worship, and opportunities to gather in community in a pastoral setting to promote the spiritual growth and spiritual development of our students. We also do ways in which we educate around our mission, our tradition, our Jesuit Catholic humanistic roots of the university and all that entails. And I would say that while we're very open to all religious traditions and all spiritual traditions, there tends to be a wide variance in religiosity of student expectations around party culture that we get to hear about and experience. Anywhere from the gamut of students who, hearing of our religious identity or of our spiritual background, come in with very strict expectations around party culture and tend to be very, very surprised in what they see and experience, and that being something that they have to confront and deal with, and providing community and space for openness and discernment around that with them, as well as students who are very, very familiar with Gonzaga or whose parents went to Gonzaga and have a narrative around whether it's party culture or that aspect of community, and come with those expectations. So we get to see a very wide range, but usually in our spaces, it tends to be an open forum and a space of trust and openness to really see where some of these aspects of the student engagement space around party culture is a place for growth, particularly a place for spiritual growth with confronted with habits or even friend groups that may not be conducive to where the student wants to be. So we get to provide a wonderful space to promote discernment within the Ignatian tradition, to do reflection around past, but also future actions, really in the spirit of Cura Personalis, helping students decide what's going to be their wholest and most full self, both for themselves during the college experience, but through their growth at the university when they leave and want to go create and foster more complete and more just communities wherever they land.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to ask Paula to introduce herself next.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, as Jenna said. My name is Paula Smith, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Students in the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict. You're already hearing from my esteemed colleagues about some of the approaches we try to take on campus, specifically trying to provide preventative kinds of education on the front end, providing spaces where we're attempting to normalize appropriate and healthy behaviors, providing resources for students who maybe are dealing with actual substance or addiction kinds of issues, providing spaces where students know that there are alternative opportunities for activities, providing space for discernment. We intersect in many ways kind of in all of those spheres, because we're the place where, as Dr. Stevenson said earlier, students might view that we are the office where you're punished. That certainly is not how we go about our work, and it's certainly not our view of the kinds of impact that we're trying to have with students that we're working with. We take a restorative practices kind of approach to help students think about their decision making, think about the impact of their behavior on the community, potentially whether or not there are individuals or community elements that are being harmed or damaged by the behaviors that they are participating in. And then more importantly, working with students to develop some action plans moving forward for potentially a personal change, as well as how to repair some of that relational damage that might have occurred. We intersect with the folks you see on this panel in many ways that sometimes we are the eyes and ears of hearing what's happening with students. So we take data really seriously. It provides a really good insight to folks like Jenna and Joey, and even pushing out information to our faculty colleagues about the where, why, and how of what we're seeing as far as what's happening in behavior of our students. And then that arms our colleagues with information so that we can identify if we have gaps, as well as what we know seems to really be working. Jenna put up a slide earlier that was that intersectionality of the work that she does in her office. I would say that when you're thinking about student behavior from a student misconduct lens, you could add one more intersectional circle to that, and that is the behavior that tends to occur based on some of that alcohol and drug use. Some of those consequences as it relates to fights or other kinds of decision making that has an impact. Most of the time, the students that we are working with, if we're seeing those more egregious kinds of things, generally speaking, alcohol or marijuana use in particular has been a factor in some of those decision making. The other thing that I would share is that a pearl that we see in our area is that most of the students that are participating in alcohol use, while we may have students that are managing substance addictions or issues, most students in the alcohol scene seem to be focused on wanting to have a sense of belonging. It's wanting to connect with peers, and it's figuring out how to redirect that in a healthy way. On the other side of the fence, many of the students that we work with through the Resolution Center when it comes to marijuana use are maybe expressing more concerns about their own ability to cope with either anxiety, stress, or kind of the different things that they have to manage in their life. We see that all of the time. So I arm you with that as parents to help inform the kinds of conversations that we appreciate you having with your students.
Thanks, Paula. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Philip to introduce yourself.
Hello, Gonzaga parents. My name is Officer Philip Tyler. I am the Crime Prevention and Education Officer with Campus Security and Public Safety. And before I start, I want to just express to you that your students now are a part of Gonzaga's family as well. And as such, we at Campus Security and Public Safety will do all we can to ensure your students are safe. How do we go about doing that? Well, it starts by their first touch with campus security, and that's generally a safety talk at their residence hall. Although this year will be unique, probably be doing it something like we were doing today. And we talk to them about the merits of not underage drinking. We talk about the effects and the behaviors of underage drinking. And then we talk about how we respond to those behaviors. Campus Security and Public Safety, we are not a commissioned police department. We are not here to drive your sons and daughters into the criminal justice system. Our work is educational. We are here to collect the dots about the behaviors associated with inappropriate use of alcohol and or drugs, provide that to our partners that as you see on this panel, so they can then connect the dots and get those individuals the help that they might need in breaking the hold of those inappropriate usages. How else do we do that? We partner with the Spokane Police Department in our off-campus areas, and they provide patrols for us in those off-campus party locations. And again, that is not to drive your sons or daughters to a criminal justice path. It is to generally inform them. Although this year's school year is unique with COVID-19, so there will be a different response to those kind of things, and we can address those things in our panel. But again, I want to impress upon you that Campus Security and Public Safety is here to respond to the behaviors associated with those misuse of alcohol and or drugs, and we are here for an educational touch point, making sure that your sons and daughters are safe in our care.
Thank you, Philip. All right, now that we have all of our panelists introduced, I am going to toggle over to my last slide, which is a few questions to sort of kick us off, if this will work here. All right, so let's see if I can put myself back on video momentarily. So the first question is, what will happen if my student is found drinking in a residence hall? And I'm going to have Paula and Phil respond to this one.
Wonderful. Well, I'll start because generally we are the first to be summoned to that location. We work closely with our student development staff and our resident assistants and resident directors, and they will summon us when the behavior becomes inappropriate in those residence halls. And our contact really is to ensure the safety of our students and those other students within that residence hall. We will collect the evidence of such underage drinking and or drug use. We'll report our findings to Paula and her staff. If the student is in distress, we will obviously summon medical aid for them. And by the grace of God, we have not lost a student due to acute alcohol poisoning because we have such a quick response, and we respond with the ZAGs, helping ZAGs to get them the assistance that they need, whether that be on campus or in our local hospital. So that's the general touch point. We'll probably collect some of the items that the student has, even if that is shot glasses and those kind of things that are paraphernalia related to the inappropriate behavior. And then that report is forwarded on to Paula and her team, and then they take the lead from there.
So once we get that information, a few things happen depending on the nature of what the circumstance was. Philip mentioned that sometimes, occasionally, we do have acute intoxication issues where students are evaluated to see if they need additional medical assistance. And the Zags Help Zags program that we have on campus is extremely effective. We are building a culture where students are willing to call for additional medical assistance and help when they feel a situation is getting beyond what they can manage. We try to honor that as well in our area, that when we're dealing with acute intoxication situations, the process that we follow is a little bit different. A facilitator is going to meet with that student, talk through what happened, but more importantly, talk about the feelings of what's going on. Sometimes in those circumstances, we find that students are feeling a tremendous amount of shame related to what happened. And again, maybe that sense that they have disappointed you as parents or families. So we try to help students work through that, do some work to identify some patterns as far as their previous substance use. And I'll talk a little bit about how then that gets forwarded to Jenna. And then we really do just work on action plans for the future. It's a collaborative effort between that student and a member of our team. Once we have that information about substance use, we do forward that information to Jenna and her folks. And Jenna will be talking about the prevention as well as the response opportunities that her area provides to equip students with information about substance use. But that's informative for them to be able to determine what kind of outcome that they have available would be most beneficial in helping a student. In situations where it's more of a party culture kind of issue, it will be something to be resolved through our student resolution processes. Most of the time for students, that's going to be a one-on-one kind of meeting with a conduct officer. We'll review the information that the residence life team or that Phil's officers have provided to us. And generally speaking, most of our students do lean into accepting responsibility for what happened. And we don't generally have to do a lot of fact finding or digging to determine whether or not they're responsible. So we're pretty quickly able to generally take the conversation more to the similar things I just talked about when we're meeting with students that are managing an acute intoxication issue. We also will do that little bit of digging as far as substance use behaviors to help inform things for Jenna's team. And then most of the time through a conduct process, there will be some kind of conduct outcome that will come from that. Generally speaking, that will include some kind of opportunity for additional alcohol or drug education, whether it's a one-on-one or group kind of setting for those students, as well as just other expectations. We do a lot of reflection work. We do a lot of research projects, sometimes informational interviewing with members of the residence life team or Phil's team. And to put your mind at ease, I mean, our area generally meets with approximately 10% of the student population, and there's only a small handful of those folks that are frequent flyers that we tend to see in our office pretty often. Most students and first-year students that we are talking to about, especially a first-time alcohol type of situations, generally just what's happened and then having an opportunity to process what happened and to think about it is usually all that's required.
So Paula, why don't you go ahead and answer the second question for us to let folks know when they may actually be notified about a student's alcohol or other drug violation?
Yeah, so we have some information on our website at the Resolution Center that is a parents and families frequently asked questions. It digs pretty deep into if your student is interacting with our office. And there is some information about our parental notification policy for alcohol and drug use. Under FERPA, obviously, for students that are over 21, we have more limited ability as an institution to provide information about what's happening related to a student's educational record. However, FERPA does have a carve out that does allow the institution to provide information to parents and families of students who are under the age of 21 when it relates to substance use issues. And so know that when we're meeting with students, a part of the conversation is going to be, have you talked to your family about this? What are the conversations on the home front? Do you need some assistance in navigating those conversations on the home front? So that we help them understand how parents and families can be partners in this process. We also try to build a setting for students to know that they are empowered to drive these conversations. They're emerging adults and we want them to have these types of conversations with you. We will notify always on a drug incident situation. If a student is found responsible for a drug violation, you will receive a letter that explains that the student intersected with our office and that they were found responsible for something related to our drug expectations on campus. And then hoping that, and again, providing you some additional resources so you can kind of dig in more about what's been happening. As it relates to alcohol, generally speaking, the first time alcohol violation, a beer in a residence hall hallway, a small group of students that have been drinking, maybe White Claws in a residence hall, those first time kinds of situations, we generally do not inform parents. If there is a second time situation or a continuing pattern, you will know that. That's good information for you to have. At the point you receive an alcohol notification letter, you can know that generally speaking, that means that's actually the second time that there's been intersection with your student on that issue. We do also reserve the judgment that in those situations of acute intoxication or extreme kinds of binge drinking behaviors that we find to be health and safety risks, we do reserve judgment, and many times we'll also notify parents about those circumstances on a first incident.
Thank you, Paula. So our next question is around education. So how can we help your students increase their knowledge or understanding around alcohol and other drugs? And we do that in several ways. The first being the ZAG into Action course that your students are actually required to complete before classes start. And that actually includes the electronic checkup to go, which is a free resource that's always available to our students. And it's an opportunity for them to actually take a self-assessment and see how they compare to their peers and then set some goals for themselves. So if they don't drink and they want to stick with that, that's awesome. Tell us more about your other goals and resources we can connect you with on campus. If they say, hey, my drinking looks like this, but I'm interested in making some changes, they can already kind of get that conversation going. So we know that we have already introduced this topic, again, from the perspective of whether or not you make the choice to use, you're likely to encounter this at some point, and we want you to have some skills along the way. For students who do go through Paula's area and they're mandated to meet with us, we have a number of opportunities. So that could most likely look like either a one-on-one conversation with my health educator, or a group class where they're actually with their peers and they go through scenarios together and they learn harm reduction techniques and they kind of talk about our culture and set some goals for moving forward. And students generally have a great experience. When we look at our feedback, they don't feel judged, they feel supported, they feel empowered to make changes, and they learn some things, and that's what we want for them. In terms of resources for students that are interested in making changes, they can also opt in to any of these educational opportunities. So again, it could be a one-on-one conversation. It could be attending a group class. They may want to get connected to our recovery community. So our house stands for Our Unique Recovery, and that's our specific recovery program on campus. It actually has a physical location, and we'll be offering a number of things virtually this year. But that's really an opportunity for students to drop in, connect with peers that are having similar life experiences. So whether they're in recovery from a substance use disorder for a long time, or they're just starting to explore sobriety, it's where we really try to facilitate connections with those students. This is also another resource for students who are looking for making changes in their use. So if they're saying, hey, I don't want to stop entirely, but this kind of isn't working, I need to talk to somebody about this. Again, they can meet with a health educator, they can get connected with interns, and we have sort of virtual drop-in hours where they may be able to do that. So that may be students who are on campus or off campus sharing about their experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and pause on the screen sharing now and open it up so you can see more of us as panelists and start responding to some of the questions that you all may have. So I've had a few personal messages come through on the chat that I hope I have responded to for folks. And I want to take a look and see if there's any additional ones that come in and offer this up to the group. So go ahead and write a message into the chat with questions that you may have for any of the panelists. Someone did ask me whether there are AA or Al-Anon chapters on campus. And yes, historically there have been meetings on campus. Those are unaffiliated with Gonzaga, but we've provided a location for those. pre-COVID-19. Right now, many of those 12-step meetings are happening in a virtual space. But what we often do for our students is sort of get them connected with our recovery program on campus and then find out what their needs are. So if they do, are a member of a 12-step community and they're really looking for a meeting, we may try to connect them with another student or another staff or faculty member who is willing to, take them along, provide some recommendations about meetings where they may be more likely to encounter other young people. Okay, I'm reading a question from Dave about a survey that students need to fill out. So the survey where I gathered this data is from the ZAG into Action course that students are required to complete. So they should have received an invitation via email. It's in their Blackboard queue. So, if your student's telling you, I haven't taken the course or I don't know what you're talking about, you can go ahead and let them know that's where they should be checking. It has 9 modules and it encompasses not only partying, but much more holistic in thinking about their transition to college. And in the alcohol and drug specific module is where that survey about their own use and that exercise is offered for them. And technically that was due yesterday. If they haven't completed it again, make sure that they go ahead and do that before they come to campus so they don't have to spend time when they're here and they can do other fun stuff. What other questions do folks have? Phil, someone asked me a question about, and I'm actually not sure if pepper spray is available for purchase on campus anywhere.
So our students can carry pepper spray on their person for self-protection. There is no purchase on campus for that. Our officers do utilize that. But what I would say to parents, to say to their students, if your students deem it appropriate for themselves to carry that, know how to utilize it and dispense it, and know it has altering effects when dispensed in closed air circulated areas such as classrooms, residence halls, etc. So deploying it in those areas can impact not only the individual you're attempting to deploy it on, but others in the affected area that might have compromised breathing systems. And I say all that to say we don't dissuade you from having that as a personal protection item, but there are other things at your disposal on campus, such as campus security, public safety, self-defense courses. There are campus safety escorts for your students to get them from one point on campus to another if they don't feel safe. We have a very well-lit campus. It's patrolled 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we do a really good job of doing that. But again, if they choose to do it, I would just say get some training on how to deploy that if they're going to use it.
Thanks, Philip. I'm seeing a question come in that I think is a good one. In terms of the pandemic, what is the gathering size that we want students to have either inside a residence hall or outside in an open setting? So I'm looking at maybe Paula or Joey, if you want to take that one on.
You can tag team here, Joey. So when it comes to events and such, in the residence halls, our partners in Housing and Residence Life have done some modifications to their guest expectations for the coming year to be conscious of how we need to take care of each other in that environment. And so they have put some criteria in place that students are asked to only be in their assigned residence hall rather than visiting people in closed air circulating kinds of spaces in other residence halls. It doesn't mean that they can't meet with peers at other areas of the campus or the types of events or engagements that Joey's area or other folks will be offering. If they are socializing in their actual residence hall, that team is going to ask that each residential student only have one other Gonzaga University friend in their space. So if we have 2 students assigned to a CM room, Catherine Monica room, it'd be appropriate to have a total of 4 people in that space. So the institution has put out quite a bit of information. I mean, we do want students to follow what state guidelines Governor Inslee has put into place for us as far as what those gatherings need to look like, expectations for face masks. And I'll kind of turn it over to Joey for how that's playing out more in an event or an engagement opportunity.
Thanks, Paula. We have been working closely with the Spokane Regional Health District and their leadership over there, and we've gotten a little bit of tentative green light to have a little bit more leeway with outdoor spaces. The science has kind of said, right, that if we're in spaces that are outside, still wearing masks as per GU policy, that we should be a little bit better. We are still keeping those, most of the events that we're gonna do that are gonna be outside are still gonna be a little bit more 5 people or so in maybe a particular pod or area. So I think the first weekend, Labor Day weekend, we're doing t-shirt bleaching, which apparently is cool with students. My students tell me it's cool, so we're doing it. And we're gonna have probably a space for about 60 to 80 people on our field, but they'll all be in groups of 5 around particular tables that we will have them kind of do the activity to kind of take it and go, and then we can bring 5 more people in after we sanitize. We have a little bit more leeway there, but of course we're still probably going to keep it as low as we can, and also we're still wearing masks, encouraging social distancing, things like that. So
Thank you both. I've seen 2 more questions come in, and these feel a little bit related to me. So some questions around, because of COVID, is disciplinary action going to look any different? And particularly thinking about things that may be going on off campus, and for on-campus residents who may think about veering off campus, what should they expect?
Do you want me to take that, Jenna?
Sure. I think between you and Phil, maybe some responses would be helpful for folks. Thank you.
Phil, you want to maybe talk first about kind of the approach to address off campus, then I guess I'll talk about what happens next.
Sure, thank you. This is Phil Tyler once again. So we are in a unique situation with COVID-19. This pandemic has been troublesome to the educational learning environment as well as community in general. So we want to be consistent, again, with the governor's orders as it relates to gathering off campus in this time of pandemic. So to that degree, we will be enforcing those standards in the community areas. If there are gatherings larger than 5 off campus, we will attempt to identify those that are the primary renters of that space. We will document the names, the numbers, the behaviors that are associated with that gathering, and we'll be forwarding that information on to Paula and her team. This is not about extending additional discipline to your students, your sons and daughters. This is about making sure that the educational process can stay open for our students and keep our community members safe, including them. So yes, we will be doing that. Our partners at Spokane Police Department will also be out doing the same. Their initial response is educational enforcement first. But again, you're seeing colleges around the nation change their tenor with regards to how they're going to deal with the students that are violating those policies and protections that keep our community at large safe. So again, we'll be out in the areas off campus. We'll be reporting, contacting those that are a part of renting those properties, documenting the information, student number, student size, and forwarding that information on to Paula and her team.
So when we receive information, also I'd point you to our website when I'm finished talking. I'm not going to be too good at multitasking here, but when I'm finished, I'll shove a link into the chat for you all. You can find some information on our website about our approach to COVID as far as responding to expectations that have a COVID element. Someone had asked questions as far as, are the consequences or outcomes for that going to be more significant? And I think because I guess I can say yes, and I can also say no, because we really try to take an approach on our campus that we're looking at the impact of behavior on individuals and on our community. So certainly individuals that are hosting really large gatherings off campus, especially if we're advertising those via social media and trying to really get 100 people to be in attendance, that's a very different kind of behavior than 3 students who are sitting in a residence hall room underage consuming alcohol. And so we will take those kinds of situations into account as far as how we'll be responding to things. And especially elements that have substance use combined with COVID related elements that seem to have more significance on the impact of other people's health and the safety and concern for our campus and our community. The university will have very limited tolerance for those kinds of behaviors because, as Phil mentioned, our primary goal is to provide a great educational experience for students who want to engage and be members of our community. And it's also just ethically what we need to do to make certain that we're taking care of each other during this time. So I'll put the link in there to give you a little bit more information about how we're trying to provide students with information about the types of behaviors that we're talking about. The off-campus guide also highlights what some of those gathering elements look like. We're not as concerned, obviously, the numbers matter, but it's really the behaviors that people are engaging within those environments that are most concerning.
Thank you both. So I know we're starting to get close to the end of our time here, so I'm going to ask Parent and Family Relations if there's anything else that they think we need to be speaking to right now, or any reminders that they might have for folks who are joining us.
I don't believe there's anything specific that we need to touch on. Thank you to our panelists for all of the amazing information that you've provided our families, and thank you to our families for joining us today.